Wait a second, dude. You cannot just pack your bags and leave. There must be a story around it. Stop for a moment and talk about it. Nearly 30 years ago, when I was a young boy, I spent my vacation with my mother in a town called Rewal on the Polish Baltic Sea. It's not hard to guess that as a teenager, my life goals were not well defined, and my needs revolved around having fun with girls. And, of course, owning a motorcycle, which was supposed to provide both fun and girls. As if it were today, I remember those times vividly. Back when the internet was still in its infancy, the best I could do was to buy magazines about motorcycles, and among them, the ones that aroused the greatest dreams were the monthly publications with classified ads for buying and selling motorcycles. I also remember conversations with the girls who lived permanently in Rewal. I clumsily tried to impress them, talking about my love for motorcycles. I would say things like, in a year or two, when I buy myself a motorcycle, I'll ride my machine all the way from Poznań to Rewal at the Baltic Sea. This conversation stuck in my head so strongly and for so long that even though it remained dormant for many years, now, after almost 30 years, I thought that I would finally fulfill the dream. I will get on a motorcycle and ride exactly there, to the same house where decades ago I promised some girl that I would do it. As you can imagine, this journey is not just an interesting topic for a video that I will gladly shoot, it is also a kind of sentimental expedition that means much more to me than just a trip. Initially, I planned to stay for 2 days with an overnight stay in the same house where I have spent several childhood vacations. But upon arrival, it turned out, well, see for yourself. Let's go! I packed lightly and checked the weather. Although I had planned to leave at 5 a.m., I could only depart at 7 a.m. due to early rainfall. The plan involved a very relaxed ride, maintaining a speed of around 80-90 kilometers. Google Maps guided me along the fastest route, but I intentionally wanted to avoid main roads and instead overtake and be overtaken by as few cars as possible. The distance from hometown to the seaside town of Kołobrzeg is approximately 320 kilometers. And then you have to go another 60 kilometers from Kołobrzeg to Rewal. From past experience, I know that covering 380 kilometers in a single day is quite a lot for me, especially considering that I have never attempted such long trips on my Royal Enfield Interceptor 650 before. I find the motorcycle to be somewhat uncomfortable, or perhaps I'm just too big for it. Although I have planned to ride without using navigation, I had arranged to meet my good friend Maciej and his father along the way. We decided on Kalisz Pomorski as our meeting point, so I used Google navigation for that part of the journey. The weather on that day was truly perfect, around 20 degrees Celsius, almost no wind and a beautiful sunny sky throughout the day. I regretted not taking more breaks. I stopped at places with beautiful views worthy of capturing a few seconds of footage. Moreover, the fuel tank of the Royal Enfield allowed me to cover a little over 240 kilometers, which further encouraged frequent stops. On my way to the coast, I had to refuel twice because, as you can guess, I started with an almost empty tank from home. As planned, Maciej and his father caught up with me in the town of Kalisz Pomorski, and we spent a pleasant hour together, strolling through the neighboring palace garden, enjoying the cheapest ice cream we could find, and discussing motorcycles. We especially talked about Maciej's father, Mr. Tomek, newly purchased Yamaha Tracer 9, which he was quite fond of. Unfortunately, the guys didn't have time to continue the journey with me to the coast, so they headed back south. Meanwhile, I continued my trip. I reached Kołobrzeg in one piece, and surprisingly, the motorcycle handled the route quite well. Despite some aches and pains, I was genuinely satisfied with myself. I didn't spend much time there, just visited the beach, saw the lighthouse, have a good lunch, and set off for the final 60-kilometer stretch from Kołobrzeg to Rewal. The journey to Rewal went by quickly. The roads were peaceful, even though it was the first weekend of the school holidays, which had begun a few days earlier. I didn't have to deal with too much traffic. Upon arrival in Rewal, my first stop was the house where I had spent my childhood vacation, as I mentioned before. Surprise! The house hadn't changed much at all. It was just painted yellow instead of the old grey-brown color, but it looked exactly the same as I remembered. I quickly met the great-grandchild of the owners who had rented us a room in the house 30 years ago. We exchanged a few words, and it turned out that the house is no longer rented for vacationers and has been converted into a staff hotel. It's a shame because it means I'll have to look for accommodation elsewhere. But since I'm already by the sea, let's do what's best to do by the sea. Let's go to the beach and take a dip into the Baltic Sea. As I mentioned before, the weather was excellent and the water that day was inviting for a swim. It wasn't easy though to navigate through the beach with all my gear, a bag full of clothes, a camera, tripod, helmet, motorcycle jacket and boots. Fortunately, there was a changing room where I could quickly change into my swim trunks. Then I spotted some nicely looking people on the beach and asked them to keep an eye on my equipment while I leisurely entered the cold water. If you've never swum in Baltic Sea, you should know that the water is never warm and rarely exceeds 18 degrees Celsius. On that day it was only 12 degrees since it was still early summer. When I came out of the water and returned to the beach, it was already 7 p.m. I took a short stroll through familiar streets, but nothing looked the same anymore. It didn't smell the same, and even our favorite ice cream parlor was no longer called Bryza. That's when I thought, why not head back home today? It can be done in 4 hours, 320 kilometers. Well, the brave conquered the world. Honestly, spending the night alone in Rewal without friends or family didn't make much sense. The goal was achieved. I revisited the town from my youthful years and felt that nostalgic atmosphere while fulfilling one of my dreams, to ride a motorcycle to Rewal. I arrived home shortly before midnight, once again taking my time on the way. I had to refuel twice and grabbed a hot dog and a hot cup of tea to warm up as it was getting chilly. On that day I covered 700 kilometers, which is definitely a personal record for me. The motorcycle performed incredibly well, and I think I need to change my negative opinion about it because I've already ridden it for almost 5,000 kilometers. Although it has occasionally questioned its reliability, that's a hard word for me, reliability. Repeat. Although it has occasionally questioned its reliability, as you can see in my earlier videos, it safely brought me home. Now I encourage all of you to spend your time in a similar way. Sit on your couch one day with a cup of tea and reflect on whether you have an old childhood dreams associated with motorcycles, bicycles or something else. It's really worth pursuing them even after 30 years. Safe travel, guys. Have a great good ride.